Hey folks, we're going to go through a quick run through of a Mythic Plus build that you can have a ton of fun with going into 9.1. So as far as tier 1 goes, you've got a couple choices here. Either Blind Fury, which pairs excellently with Cycle of Hatred and is usually the preferred option. Alternatively, you could go with a slightly different build with Demonic Appetite. It makes you a little bit less front loaded from a damage perspective, but it does provide some additional survival and basically getting more or lesser soul fragments and granting additional fury. So pretty solid. Fellblade, that's really just a single target damage, so don't sweat that. Don't even consider it, to be honest. Tier 2, Insatiable Hunger is by far the preferred one to go with, especially when you've lined it up with Cycle of Hatred. It's just going to generate more fury, and it's going to basically trigger the resets with Chaos Strike. So easy way to play. Burning Hatred just has so much more downtime. Um, my preference is to go with Insatiable Hunger. It's also what I use for my builds for raiding as well. For the tier 3 talents, it really kind of comes down to a little bit of what your preference may be. Some players actually prefer Glaive Tempest, and it's interesting to see this start to get more play. Um, Basically, being able to provide a little bit of extra AoE burst, which is a solid option. Alternatively, you can go with Unbound Chaos. It doesn't have a target cap, which is absolutely glorious, especially if you're in a big pack that's being kited. Um, However, we did see that the damage buff from Fell Rush is actually going to be reduced to 500% the normal damage as opposed to 600% in 9.05. So keep that in consideration. Trial of Room, still not competitive. Um, Avoid that for the time being. Tier 4, Soul Rending is the preferred way to go, but I think it comes down to what your preference is. If you're with a group where you may benefit from having an immunity, you can go with it. Alternatively, just getting that passive leech is just a real easy way to help your own survivability. Tier 5 talents, it really depends on what build you want to play. Um, First Blood is definitely more consistent and opens up options throughout the talent tree. But Cycle of Hatred is more explosive, has additional synergies with not only the talents that we were talking about earlier, but also some legendaries as well, and we'll touch that in a moment. Um, the two playstyles don't really change that much, so it's an easy way to roll. Tier 6, for me, I like Unleash Power. It definitely grants the most consistent access to additional crowd control, and not having any kind of cost for an AoE stun is hard to beat. So that's my preference. Filler Eruption can work if you're looking for an additional lockdown tool. Either really works. And then finally, Demonic works really well with the Cycle of Hatred. Kind of, we mentioned that earlier. Um, Gives you extra survival when you're paired up with Soul Rending, so it gets super useful. Momentum is strong. I even thought we'd see Momentum fight back a little more in terms of the raid builds, um, but really it just requires so much more management of your tune, so don't even sweat it. Um, it's not a bad way if you prefer the fast casting all over the place, um, and really kind of plays on like the aesthetic and the theme of what we're trying to accomplish with Demon Hunters being these super fast, agile class. But Demonic is still the way to go. Unfortunately, Fell Barrage, it's a nice tool, but just doesn't knock down the other two and doesn't have the synergies. Hopefully, we see that change because Fell Barrage is super satisfying in my opinion. As far as legendaries go, Collective Anguish is a really safe pick. It boosts the damage of each of your eye beams and casts along some free healing. Scales up really well with Cycle of Hatred builds, and we talked about why that's favorable. Um, Alternatively, Dark Glare Boon does get a little bit of love after it got its buff in 905 patch. Um, it's got the highest damage potential, but it's so RNG reliant that you just want to avoid it. If you go dry on procs, then it's not going to be very satisfying. Then finally, Burning Wound. It's a little awkward to really make sure you're maintaining the dot on multiple enemies. Um, but if you're able to, you're going to see really high sustained AoE damage after its buffs that it received in 9.05. Also provides some of the best single target damage, so you'll see Burning Wound used a lot actually is with Havoc in different raid compositions. Again, as far as the covenants go, all four have some solid benefits, some drawbacks. None of them have really sexy covenant legendaries that I'm going to make a big recommendation on though. So, Kyrian is solid for their AoE burst. If you can just knock it down, a 2 second wait time on their totem isn't very crazy. Necrolord's definitely volatile since you're waiting on their proc and you don't really know where they're going to land specifically. Night Fae provides a solid single to mid target burst cooldown and very strong soulbind options. That's why Night Fae is usually the preferred option. And then Venthyr provide a massive uncapped AoE cooldown with Sinful Brand once you're able to drop Metamorphosis. So if you can drop that on a big enough pack, you're having a ton of fun. There are a lot of fun, satisfying ways. Like I mentioned earlier, this is my third Demon Hunter that I've been leveling, just to having a ton of fun testing out the different Covenant and Conduit choices that are out there. I think you're going to see Demon Hunters with some baseline buffs, specifically Demon's Bite and Chaos Strike getting buffed up by 15%. You'll see Demon Hunters getting a little more love, which is great to see. Outside of that, folks, that's kind of how we're sitting right now. The spec is in a healthy spot. Happy to see kind of the lower single target damage get removed, but for us in Mythic Plus, that's not going to be life or death today by any means. Let me know what you thought of the guide. Let me know what I missed, what I didn't touch on, what I should have touched on, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks for watching. Peace.